SO2 is purely our problem. It is defined as a non-attainment county in the non-attainment area. And so here we have the approximate number of exceedances allowed at each site. Oh, this is not the most recent. Since we don't have the line here. So basically it's 5. I updated this graph, and I guess we don't have the most recent graph. And so you'll see there, so there should be a red line across here that says 5. And so, and there's a reason for a number for that. It's a statistical determination of how the standard is applied. So you have to have basically the 99th or 95th percentile.
Is the lines at 3 or 5?
I'm sorry, it's a 3. It's a 3. I'm sorry, it's a 3.
Again, I'm trying to look at this map.
No.
So being colorblind, trying to read things is kind of hard, so I can't see it very well. Okay, so it is at 3, and 3 is a statistical determination. It's not, ozone specifically says in the rule it's the 4th highest. SO2 is specifically a percentile of the data that you have has to be. So basically any value over 3 is averaged over 3 years is a violation of the max. And anything over 75 is going to be an exceedance. And so this is the number of exceedances. If you look in 2017, we had, obviously you see the trend here. 2017, there was a significant number at Liberty. Liberty obviously is downwind from the Clairton facility. North Braddock Monitor is downwind for the Edgar Thompson facility. 2018, obviously there was a significant improvement. 2019, the interesting thing here is every single one of those exceedances in the green and blue, the right and left, happened during the episode where there were no SO2 controls for the fire. Now, why is that important? Well, look at this graph here. And so this shows 1 hour highs. And so you get 1 hour out of every 24 hours is how the standard is determined. And so what happened, if you look, you see the fire there, and you go to the left, and just to the right of that last spike, U.S. Steel started to install their higher stacks and their additional SO2 controls. That was part of that state implementation plan that we submitted to EPA that shows how we're going to show attainment with the SO2 plan. That's when that happened. And so you see all the static to the left, and then late in the summer of 2018 is when that plan went into effect. U.S. Steel started implementing those plan requirements. Things were going pretty good, and then we had a fire on Christmas Eve of 2018 that carried on through April of 2019. And so you see all those violations. So all those exceedances of the standard happened during that time. Since then, the trend has been much lower than our historical trend. And keep in mind that this value only goes up to September of 2019. This fall has actually been pretty clean for SO2. So this isn't all the data. All our data comes in and has to be certified before we can provide it. And it actually isn't completely certified yet. Sorry for all this data. Oh, PM 2.5, this is our most, okay. So PM 2.5, this is our most significant persistent problem. So what you're looking at here, if you remember, there are 2 standards for PM 2.5. There is an annual standard of 12 micrograms per cubic meter, and then there is a 24-hour standard for 75 micrograms per cubic meter. And so based on the statistical analysis, we're allowed a certain number of violations at each one of these monitors. And that's on 2, isn't it?
35.
This is, oh, I'm sorry, this is 35. Yeah, but the line, that is supposed to be
It should
7.
be 8. It should be at 8.
At 8,
PM
okay.
2.5 is
So
at
8.
98 percentile.
Okay.
If you measure every single day, it would be your 8th reading.
Yeah, and I apologize for that because I had to adapt these over from Word. Yes, and I lost a lot of it. So imagine that line is at 8. So what is that telling us? Now, those are all exceedances, even if they're below the 8. If you see anything, that means something has been read above a 35. Well, that's a problem because people are experiencing that pollution. The EPA is not a problem until you get over 7 of those each year, averaged over 3 years. And so we have two issues here. Obviously, there's the health impact of people enduring this pollution, and there's also the fact that we're failing to meet the standards because of that. If you look, 2017 was a rough year. 2018, and I'll have some more data, shows was a really good year. It was our cleanest year for PM 2.5 for both the 24-hour standard and the 12 and the annual standard in our history. So in 2019, what is going on here? You see that spike. Every single one of those exceedances, and there were 9 of them, that happened during 2019. Every single one of those happened during 2 episodes. We had the episode, if you recall, in February during the fire, where we had an extended occurrence of inversions day after day after day. We actually had 3 exceedances during that time, which shocked me because the inversions actually lasted longer than that. We actually expected to see more, but we were surprised that there were only 3. And then, over the holiday break, we had 6 more between December 21st and December 27th. So we had 6 more. So there's 2 problems. Well, there's multiple problems with that. One, people had to endure in the Mon Valley at the Liberty monitor. We didn't have any other monitors exceeding it, even though we were seeing higher values than all of our monitors, but we weren't seeing exceeding values. People in the Mon Valley had to endure 6 days of bad pollution for one event and 3 days during another event. The other problem with that is this is keeping us from meeting the National Air and Air Quality Standards. In addition to that, the big problem is this demonstrated a hole in our regulations. As a health department, our mandates are defined by regulation. Our authority is given to us by regulation. So we had this event. A lot of people wanted us to do something about it, but the reality is we have to have the authority defined by regulation to do that. We didn't have that in this event because EPA defines this as an exceedance. It's not a violation. They don't consider it an immediate health event. So that's why we made that announcement that we're going to look at our air pollution episodes rule and update it to try to be more consistent with the NAAQS. That's really important. I'll talk a lot more about that a little bit later. Now this is a busy graph. This shows all of our monitors. This shows our general trends for all of our monitors. This is what EPA expects us to demonstrate to meet the annual. Remember I said that's 12 micrograms per cubic meter. This is what EPA wants us to do to demonstrate compliance with their federal standard. You'll see all of these monitors. This shows 3 different years. 2017, which was a bad year all the way around the county. 2018 and 2021. The reason 2021 is EPA gives us very specific criteria. When we submit a plan to them to show how we're going to bring pollution into compliance with their standards, it has to be by 2021, and that's what our modeling shows. If you see all of our monitors in Allegheny County, and remember, we have one of the densest monitoring networks in the country. I'm still trying to find another county that has more monitoring locations than we do, and I still have not found it. We have more monitors in the state of Mississippi. And it's not just these monitors. We have many other monitors. We have 16 monitoring sites for a variety of pollutants. Another interesting thing you'll see here is it's going to show attainment even with World Health Organization standards. However, that's not a compliance standard. That doesn't have a rigorous authoritarian regimen behind it or a statute called the Clean Air Act that requires us to respond to that. And so our problem there is that Liberty monitor. Right now, our modeling is showing it shows that 1, 2, 3 step, that 17, 18, 19. Between right now with 2018, we had a really clean year. We're on. The interesting thing about 2019, we almost, even with the fire, almost had a similar year to 2018 until this most recent weather-related pollution event happened. Now here's another way of, this is just the Liberty. This shows a longer trend. This basically, instead of showing those 3 years, this shows this longer trend. And here's the interesting thing about this trend. If you look at all of our monitors over time, and everybody's seen a lot of this line graph, it shows improvements over time. And then we had it, and this is every one of these is a 3-year average, and that's because that's what EPA requires us to monitor the data. Obviously, 2015, after 2015, the data started going up, but then it started coming back down again. Now, in the next graph, we'll show you why that is. But basically, this just shows a little bit longer trend in there's the estimate for this year. What we expect it to be is 12.9, which is still on the trend. Is that 12.3? Okay, I'm sorry, 12.3. But again, we're still on the trend to meet attainment by 2021. Now here's the graph that's really important. This is 3-year blocks, actually rolling 3-year average. Every year you re-average for the last 2 years. This is the annual data. This is each individual year. So what's important about this, and again, this is the annual average again. So this shows the downward trend and how long this has been going on. And the one thing I want to point about this downward trend, like I said before, Pittsburgh is recognized for having some of the worst air pollution quality in the country. The other thing we're recognized for, because we started so high, is we've had some of the largest decreases in pollution in the country as well. We've got our work cut out for us. There's a lot going on. We have a lot to tackle. And so some of these decreases are some of the largest decreases in the country. Now, we're not bragging about that. This shows we still have a long way to go, but it also shows that we've been working really hard to get here, and we still have a lot of work to do. But here's that disturbing trend that started with 2014 when the values started going back up. And if you can see in 2018, obviously, you recall that there was an enforcement order that happened in 2018. A lot of action happened. It was settled, but then immediately compliance rates started to improve, and there was a significant reduction there. Now I'm going to switch gears to give an update on Title V. Title V has been in the news a lot. Right now, we have an effort for Title V backlog reduction. We have 2 new contract permit engineers. I'm going to talk about how we ended up with those 2 contract engineers. We have 1 new engineering training position added. And so between those 2, those are 2 full-time equivalents. But there are some things I want to mention about Title V. A lot of people are confused about. Title V permits do not reduce pollution. They do not set emission standards. Emission standards are set by installation permits. All installation permits for all equipment have to be developed. What a Title V permit is a federal permitting standard. So EPA and the federal government can enforce our permits. So once we finalize all of our installation permits, which develops the standards, then they're consolidated into a Title V permit. And it is an onerous process. And here's the numbers. I don't know if you can follow this, but the green means good. That means completed. The yellow or orange, basically. The second from the bottom, it shows that those that are expired and they are being in development. And the top, they are unissued. These are facilities that have never had a Title V permit. So I'm going to talk first about the unissued permits. So we have 4 unissued permits. Harsco, I talked about that before. One of the reasons, there's 2 reasons they don't have a Title V permit. They weren't determined to need a permit until recently, and they submitted their first application in 2018. However, we had an ongoing enforcement issue with Harsco. You cannot issue a Title V permit until enforcement issues are resolved. There cannot be unresolved compliance until before a Title V permit. So we have to resolve those. So now we have resolved this week, Tuesday, we actually signed the order, and that has been resolved, and so you can expect to see a Harsco Metals Title V permit very soon. Alcosan is also, it's a non-major Title V source. They're not a major source of emissions. What they have is an incinerator. Incinerators have what's called a DSHAP that applies to them. That's a new emission standard for hazardous air pollutants. They're considered Title V because they're hazardous air pollutants, and so they need a level of stringency required by federal rules. EPA only recently determined that this DSHAP applies to Alcosan. So because of that, we have only recently started working on the Title V for Alcosan. Eastman Chemicals, they have never had one. However, they have been under a joint EPA and ACHD consent order for a number of years, and they have had over a dozen different installation permits requiring them to install equipment, do a number of testing, and reduce their emissions of VOCs. And so we are getting close to resolving that. But again, you can't have a Title V permit with unresolved compliance issues. ATI, also known as Allegheny Ludlam, they have never had a Title V permit either. There's a myriad of reasons for that. There's many reasons. One is because every couple of years they keep changing the process, so they keep submitting new installation permits, so we have to update those. But one of the most concerning things right now with us is we're working with EPA to finalize a couple of determinations, and 2 of those are the application of new source review. We have had 4 different permit engineers from EPA in the last 2.5 years, and they've all come up with a different determination how to apply new source review. we have to rely on EPA, so you see how frustrating that is, because we have to be consistent with EPA. The other thing is there's some issues with the testing methods and testing location that EPA is working on as well. And EPA has to make those decisions before we can finalize anything with Allegheny below them. So that's one of the things, just keeping that Title V permit from being completed. Now here's some other updates. We've had a lot going on with personnel. We do have a new air pollution program manager, Steve Luker, he's here. He was the previous enforcement chief. Now, what this does for us, the air quality program is our biggest, most complicated program. All of our other programs have a program manager and they have an assistant program manager or an operations chief. Yet air quality did not, and we have much more activity going on, more complicated activity. So we decided to reorganize our program into two different sections. One with permitting and planning, and the other with enforcement and monitoring. And Dean will be taking over enforcement and monitoring. Well, Jamie and Dean, I think to me that makes a perfect team because it elevates enforcement to the level of program manager, so it shows our emphasis on enforcement. And then Jamie, with her just amazing amount of expertise and her ability to, especially with planning, and that allows her to spend more time developing new rules and working on SIPs as well as working with permitting. And so that gives us a really good management team. It gives us a better opportunity to better tackle a lot of the issues because they don't get any easier. Believe it or not, pollution, we have less pollution every year, but the regulations become more complex. And with climate issues, it becomes more difficult to deal with that. So it takes a lot of work to develop new processes and new ways to combat these issues with air pollution. We also hired some business consulting services. Last year, we brought in a business consultant to look at our permitting program to determine the workflow, to look at the workflow, how much work they're doing, where it's going, create a model, determine if we had the appropriate staffing needs. So I showed you before, we hired two new full-time equivalents. We determined that we needed to hire a full-time engineer and we have two contract engineers. That's the part of that staffing. So we go to the county and say we need new full-time equivalents, we need new staff. We just can't say because we're behind. We have to have empirical evidence that this is a good business model. You know, we're responsible for public funds, so we're going to have some empirical evidence to show what we need, how we need it, and what we're going to do with it as well. So right now, we're doing the same thing for the rest of the program. The rest of the program, remember, is monitoring and enforcement and planning as well as the asbestos program. Now we have added two new asbestos inspectors. Asbestos is a very important issue. A lot of people fail to understand that. Pennsylvania is one of the worst states in the country for asbestos mortality. Allegheny County is one of the worst in the state. We are more than twice the national average, and so that's an issue. We've added two new asbestos inspectors. What's important about these two, they will be cross-trained to be able to respond to general air quality complaints. So that does allow us more capacity for inspections for air quality. Change management training is going to begin. This doesn't seem like much, but it really is important. With our accreditation, reaccreditation, it's really important that we look at ourselves as an organization and make changes as necessary. This change management is part of that. Regulatory agencies are inherently very conservative agencies. They have very specific mandates. Those mandates don't change. And so they get very comfortable with certain patterns. And so we really need to, and this change management won't apply just to air quality, it will apply to all of environmental health because we really do, our managers need to be equipped with the skills, and this is management training and how to manage change. And so we give our managers the ability to change, to understand that, and to be able to lead their staff to be able to initiate new change. In addition, we submitted our PM 2.5 SIP. It also incorporated our new modeling protocol. I cannot stress how proud we are of this new modeling protocol. That moved the needle for science. You recall our SO2 SIP was late because EPA's models that they gave to us could not accommodate the very complicated meteorology and terrain that we have here. So we had to actually develop our own. For EPA to accept a new modeling protocol, they just don't. And so that is very specific. And so I'm really proud of our modelers and our planning group and how they came together to put that together. And so that helped us with our SO2 SIP, but it also was incorporated in the PM 2.5 SIP, and that modeling protocol also was part of the delay for that PM 2.5 SIP. But now we have that PM 2.5 SIP in place. And remember, the PM 2.5 SIP, any SIP can only take us to the standard. It can't allow us to go beyond that. A lot of people get frustrated. They think it's an opportunity to throw any kind of control in there to reduce emissions as much as possible. Our case law shows we're only allowed to go up to the standard, not exceed it. Again, reiterate that June 27th U.S. Steel settlement, $200 million in improvements. Those will have direct effects on PM 2.5. Over the next 5 years, U.S. Steel will be making a lot of improvements to their operations. They will directly affect PM 2.5, and they will directly affect H2S. That is an opportunity to go beyond that standard from the SIP, so keep that in mind. And I'm really proud of that Title V backlog reduction. I think that is something that we changed management in our permitting group, and our new manager, she's really good. She's got a business background, and she's really helped us with that, as well as the business consultant. We also intervened in the citizen case represented by the National Law Center, and I just talked about that recently, what that means. That is ongoing. There's not a lot I can talk about that. These are some objectives. We have a lot going on here. I challenge anybody in this room to look at any other air agency in the country and look at them in the last 2 or 3 years and see that they're doing as much as Allegheny County. We're very proud of what we're doing. People from all over the country have recognized us for the progressive things that we have been doing. There's a lot going on. I mean, the regulatory world is really complicated. It is slow. It is tedious, but we are doing a lot more than a lot of other groups, and and this is not everything that we're doing. Again, we talked about that new rule for weather-related pollution episodes. We have an old existing rule that is outdated. Why is it outdated? Because in the past, in the early 90s, EPA gave us guidance on how to set those standards for which you would incorporate a plan to reduce emissions. Well, those standards were usually 2-3 times the actual emission standard, the ambient standard. The old ones that were really high, they were EPA sediment levels that would never be reached, so they weren't really protected, and EPA has not given those. So we have the construct for how we're going to do this, and in addition to that new weather-related pollution episode rule that we will be developing, please be patient because it has to go through the rulemaking process. Nothing happens overnight. There is no immediate, there is no now. We will also be looking at advancing our ability to do forecasting and modeling to better understand and predict when these episodes will happen. The coke oven rule, that's another thing we have to be patient on. We only have about 50 people in our organization. Those same 50 people were called to deal with fire. So this coke oven rule we've been working on this for a while. But then the fire happened. Those people who were working on the rule were dealing with the fire. And then the settlement, those people who were dealing with the coke oven rule were working on the settlement. Now the settlement specifically identifies issues with the coke oven rule. If you remember last December, not this past December, but December 2018, during the hearings, it became very clear that we had issues with our procedures for determining compliance. And so that really set the coke oven rule back because that's something that we have to address. So we have those, and when I say those procedures, we have inspectors on the ground looking at this equipment, determining what is an exceedance and marking those as violations. And so we really have to revamp that, and the settlement directly related to that. Fuel sulfur rule change is a significant change, and fuel sulfur that can be burned reduces it significantly. It's consistent with the state rule. We have to be on the same time schedule. Air permit fee changes. Our air permit fees that's how we fund most of our program. They are dictated by the state. The state hasn't raised those in years. This is very anticipated because right now we actually spend more money than we bring in that area, and so this will give us an opportunity to be more above, to be in the black again, as opposed to being in the red. We still need to finalize the June 2019 settlement order, and remember, that is a confidential negotiation, so talk much about that. We're going to implement the consulting staffing and IT recommendations. Remember, the business consultant was coming in, they're going to look at our staffing needs. He also has looked at, and in the past, for the permitting, and we'll be looking at our IT needs. Our IT needs are one of those things that we feel is woeful. We need to be brought up to speed so we can give our permit engineers and all of our people and air staff the tools so they can do the job more efficiently,
effectively, as well as for us to be able to track and report out to the public the things that we can do a lot easier instead of just using paper reporting. And again, that's those IT upgrades. Here's something that's been going on. A few of you know about it. To complete the CMU study to better understand air pollution in the Mon Valley. This is also moving to science. This is moving the needle for science, like that model upgrade that we did, EPA approved. This is actually using computational flow to look at this very specific, every inch of the Mon Valley to understand how pollution flows. Once they complete that study, we will have a very detailed look at how it's done. And this is something that will probably push EPA to change how modeling is done for air pollution. And here are some of the challenges.
These are some of the things I really want to focus on. We have a lot of challenges. And before I get too far in these, and as I go through these challenges, this is where I want to, this is kind of a plea. I recognize the efforts and the rally today, and I see your signs, clean air now. Clean air doesn't happen now. It doesn't happen immediately. I'm going to go through these barriers. We have things that are happening now were initiated years ago. Increasing our staff, hiring our legal department, improving upon that, initiating regulations. We are a nation of laws, and so it takes a while to go through these things. And so we're on our way. There's still a lot of work to be done, but these things are in place. We are doing more than any other air agency in the country. Just have to be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. If someone waved a magic wand, the most stringent regulations in the country will put here, as well as the most overwhelming enforcement. Today, it would be years before you saw the results of that. But that's in an ideal world. We have to go through due process and a regulatory process. So let me go to ozone real quick. I talked about ozone is not a precursor. Methane is not heat, it is a heat trapping of methane presence. Science is not caught up to ozone drilling. The administration right now is weakening a lot of the previous rules for ozone, for fracking. Problem with that is the release of methane, the release of VOCs that is related to ozone. Fracking is not part of that ozone modeling right now. Again, that science is not there in all of these leaks, and so these are challenges that we're going to have to deal with. And the science is not caught up to that. And again, I talked about the longer, hotter summers. The climate, and you can argue whether climate change is happening or not, but like I said, in the last since 2008, 2018, we had 4 weather-related pollution events for PM. We had 2 in the last year. This past December was one of our worst as far as the strength and duration. It's 75% of the days in the month of December were inversions. That is far beyond what we've seen in the past. And October was an especially bad month. September was an especially bad month. The interesting thing is our emissions are far lower now than they have ever been. We had a lot of really strong inversions in September and October that I expected to see violations. In the past, you would have 1 day of inversion, and then you would have an exceedance of a standard. But this is not happening anymore. Now it's happening when that air quality builds up day after day. So we have to be able to adapt to that and deal with it. And there are a lot of studies. There's a lot of studies. We don't have anything specific to Pittsburgh, but there are a lot of areas that have 4 PM that have demonstrated through studies that the expectation is we're seeing it now and expect it to continue. The weather-related extreme events are going to cause pollution episodes. And here's something else I want to point out that a lot of you may not know. In this most recent episode that we had, the Clairton facility was operating with 1 battery down, and they were actually extended idling. So they weren't getting as much as they normally do, and we still have this issue. Now, that's not to take away from the fact that they are the most significant contribution to PM in the area. But keep that in mind. They were not emitting, and their compliance rates are some of the highest that we've ever seen. And so, ideally, they're probably operating better than they have, and we still have this event. So this is a challenge that we have to be able to be prepared for. That's why we need to look at our rules to be able to respond to that as well. And the regulatory barriers to due process. Again, this is where I stress patience. It is a legal framework. We are subject to rules and laws. Any enforcement action we do will be challenged. It will be drawn out as long as we can. Even a lot of regulations we develop. We have to go through all of our public participation process. Allegheny County has an excellent public participation process because we have subcommittees, we have committees, and
then we have the board. Usually it's just a state adopts a rule. The state of Pennsylvania is actually better than most states for that as well. But again, it takes time, and then once that rule is implemented, you have to install equipment. You have to get through the legal challenges. Again, so these things happen. And so we're not just starting now, we've been working on these things for a long time, and they continue to go. And we can't be arbitrary about developing regulations. We just can't come in and say, hey, all boilers must reduce emissions. We have to have data to show that it is feasible, and then we have the authority to do that. So it's not arbitrary. So when you demand cleaner standards, it's like, well, we have, the onus is on us to determine what is the threshold for that. And it's resource intensive. Again, we have only 50 people in our program, roughly 50 people, and only a portion of those actually deal with enforcement as well as rulemaking. So we can't do a lot of rules at one time. We have to be able to do what we can when we can. EPA, the reason I put this up here is people don't realize we have mandates from EPA that tell us exactly what we need to do and do with our money. We need to write permits. We need to enforce those permits. We need to monitor the air, and we need to submit plans to EPA. This organization in Allegheny County does far beyond that. Why do we do that? Because we are located in a health department that gives us additional resources. So we actually expand our mandate more than agencies do across the country. That is exceptional. It's one of the reasons I love taking this job, because it's like, you know, a gift basket. It's like all these things that you wanted to do, that your both hands tied behind your back, you have that. Again, it takes time to be able to do these things. It is time sensitive. And here's the other thing, like I had on earlier, EPA is not responsive anymore. I have a lot of close friends who work with EPA. They're very despondent. They're not. If we're coming up against requiring a facility to spend a lot of money to do, say, testing, EPA is going to be resistant to require that. So and when we need regulation interpretation, we're just not getting that support from EPA. So it's getting to the point where we're almost going to have to go on it alone, where before we were lockstep with EPA, and EPA was giving us all the support that we needed. As well as funding. EPA, either they're reducing funding by a small amount, or they're keeping it stagnant. So we're not getting anywhere with EPA. So again, it's that plea that I'm making to you, to be patient. There's a lot going on. This doesn't happen overnight. We are busy. We're doing a lot. So I think that's all that I have. If anybody has any questions from the board, I'm sorry that took so long, but I think there's really important messages here we need to talk about.
Any questions or comments?
Yes,
The EPA standards change over time. And so, for instance, the PM 2.5 fell a few years ago, was lower
Yes.
a few years ago. Are there likely to be any changes in the standards that will be coming up? My guess is I can answer it myself given this administration. It's an open question, is that these are moving targets, and so the targets can move.
You would be correct. The Clean Air Act requires the standards to be evaluated for change every 5 years. PM 2.5 is past due for that. I know that the PM 2.5 Advisory Committee was dissolved by the administration. They are the ones who do the work to look at the science and look at what's out there. That does not exist anymore. And I know, from what I understand, because I follow this closely, because when they change, we have to change. And all signals are that we would expect to see the PM 2.5 standard.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to say that, I appreciate the effort to, as, things are being made, to continue to proactively look for, additional mechanisms, like when we're having conversions, or increasing basis, to take those into account. I think that's really important. I also, appreciate the upgrade in the report. This is a very readable document. A lot of, these graphs are really more helpful, for
Thank you, Lane.
for this. Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so now we have Jamie Graham giving a bunch of presentations on fund requests. Unfortunately, I have to leave at 2:30, so I'll end the meeting as we done at that time. And I asked if we be concise on these.
I will try. The first regulation change is the fuel, sulfur fuel and oil. You have your brackets in front of you.
fuel oil down, to 500 parts per million. And number two fuel oil is used in homes, it's home heating, and also a number of industrial uses of number two fuel oil. An arrangement or an agreement by all the Northeast states was to move that number down to 15 parts per million. And so we're a part of that, so this is a request to move the sulfur content down to 15 parts per million. It's very feasible by the industry, they've not had issue with this. We had a public comment period, we had no adverse comments. So this is coming to you for final approval to move it forward to county council. There's not much I can say about that. Like I said, we've seen this before, to move it to 500, and you saw this before with the public comment, moved down to 15. If there's any questions.
Questions or comments?
Motion to accept?
Second?
Any additional discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Green vapor pressure.
Don't be too late. The next package is, now this is a request to go to public comment. And again, this is something that you have seen before, you saw it last year. Green vapor pressure is the measurement of how volatile gasoline is, how much is gonna vaporize out of the tank as you're driving down the road. And, what we did last year is we were proposing, and you accepted, and moved forward, is to remove this from our overall plan for ozone, because that's what control for ozone. Because the newer cars are much better at capturing the volatile organics, and they actually turn them back to gasoline, they bring it back down into a liquid form. So this would be to, now that it's taken out of our federal plan, it's now essentially a dead regulation. So it's something we can't enforce, or we won't enforce, it's sitting in our regs, and just to clean up our regulations, this is to remove it from the Article 21.
Any comments?
Motion to remove it?
This is to go to public comment.
I got you.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Now I have
Fund
several
request.
clean air fund requests. Most of these you've seen before, so they may not be much of an issue. The first one is the Southwest Pennsylvania Air Quality Partnership. This is a group that we've been very involved in, and the state has been very involved in it. It's a educational group, and also to encourage voluntary actions by individuals to decrease emissions. They're actually the official sponsor of the Air Quality Index that the state puts out. The state publish it as part of their participation in the Southwest Pennsylvania Air Quality Partnership. Partnership has done poster contests, they do events. We have a mascot, Coach AQ, that comes to places and shares information. We partnered with the Group Against Smog Pollution to have a school flag program through this group. This is a basic support for their operations, which is allowed under our process. So it'll be $25,000 per year for 3 years. Us and the county and the state are really the primary and almost sole support for this group. Occasionally have some industrial funds, but it's mostly between the state and the county. We've supported this many times before, well over 12, 15 years. It just came up again and requesting support. I will say that it has increased. We were supporting it $15,000 a year. We asked for 25. The state has, the last 2 years, the state's been out of money, so they have stopped their support for the next 2 years. They are hopefully, they will be coming back to support it next year.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have just one question about this. There are a number of measures of progress that are listed here in the application, but I know we've supported this in the past. I don't recall seeing a report on any of these kinds of engagement measures, and I just wondered if we could get.
Yes, I can provide you. We can get an annual report for them.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Any additional comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay, the second one is still with the Southwest Pennsylvania Air Quality Partnership, but is a specific program called the Lawnmower Exchange Program. And it's actually lawnmower exchanges and in-home health tools. And what it is actually a rebate, rebate program, and again, we've sponsored it for, a dozen years or so. It's been very useful. Last year's report said they actually spent more than we gave them on rebates, so that's good to hear. 6 double-stroke engines of, 2-stroke engines, lawnmowers, even 4-stroke lawnmowers are actually one of the dirtier sources of pollution, because we're talking about small engine. And so the idea is we give rebates for those that turn in their gasoline equipment, lawnmowers. They get a rebate toward a battery-operated one or electric-operated one, or a manual. They get enough rebate, they can actually get a manual lawnmower paid for, or a partial payment for some of the other equipment. It's been very successful, it's well received. We think it's a good use, dollar per ton, it's a good resource.
How does that word get out to the retailers?
We are partnered with True Value, and they have a television show, so they put it out. The actual equipment goes to True Value, and you get the rebate. The rebate can be used at any place. You can take it to Home Depot and use it.
So it's
So
not
that's the
confined to
information.
just one
Oh,
retailer?
no, we would not do that. But that's our deposit place, so we receive them there,
Gotcha.
and then they can buy them anywhere.
Thank you.
Is the old equipment taken out of service?
Yes, whole equipment is taken out of service.
Okay, any additional questions? No motion?
Motion to accept?
Second? Oh, did, okay, any additional discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Pittsburgh Regional Future City Competition. This is a really interesting group, and we actually have a member of our staff who's very active in this, and we've been very excited about it. It's a high school program through the Carnegie Science Center, and they have teams that develop cities, but the cities have to have environmental programs, they have to have water treatment, they have to have solid waste management, they have to have air management, they have to do this, and they are under the guidance of engineers that help them work through this process. We've sponsored them before, we've raised it some, the last time it was $2,000 a year, we've asked for $3,000 a year, just for their over 3 years.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a comment, I guess we've been 3 years already.
I know.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Additional discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
And the Pittsburgh Regional and Engineering Fair is also out at Carnegie Science Center. There you have hundreds and hundreds of students. If anybody has a chance, it's in the end of March. It's a wonderful thing to go to see these wonderful minds working and showing their wares. I'm sorry, that was Jim's.
It was better than I would.
So, well, this is actually a joint between the Clean Air Fund and the Environmental Health Fund, $2,500 from each fund for each year, so we're a $5,000 sponsor, as a health department, and with that, we give several awards that are specific health department awards. So $7,500 from the Clean Air Fund, $7,500 from the Environmental Health Fund, to be for 3 years, total 3 years of sponsorship for the science fair. I am a judge there, and I'm amazed at the knowledge that these kids come up with.
Any questions? Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, you're on a roll.
And
so-
with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
We're gonna ask for $14,000 for larvicide. So our environmental health program, the housing program, they do vector control every year. And this is for West Nile and Zika, related mosquitoes. And so they have, stormwater, floodwater type areas to deal with. Obviously, it's becoming more of a problem because we have more wet events each year. But we're asking for $14,000 to extend our program. Right now, we have state funding, but then we have some shortages there, as well as increasing equipment costs. And so we want to help fortify that program with $14,000 from the Environmental Health Fund for larvicide to kill mosquitoes before they become adults. So 1 year. This is for 1 year, so it's 1 year, to see how it goes.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there anything, it's somewhat related to this, but or not, what about deer ticks?
Well, Yeah, that's a whole other issue,
Okay.
but we don't have a program to eradicate deer ticks.
Okay.
The DEP did just start giving us money for surveillance, just for tick surveillance, but this is the first time we are receiving funding for that, so it's starting.
If you wouldn't mind, keep us up to date on that
Absolutely.
next meeting, okay?
Sure.
Motion to accept this.
Second.
Yeah, just, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
is that it's entirely for the bacillus, species, so for the, are there other things that are done that are insecticides?
What was the question?
What are the insecticides, are the bacillus,
This
There's interest in-
particular, yes, for the 4-star brickbats, which are 180 days they last, so they'll continue working for most of the summer.
But the specific mosquito.
The specific mosquito is the Culex, I'm pretty sure. It will work on the other mosquitoes, but those wetlands mostly contain the Culex, which is the one that carries West Nile virus mainly.
The question was about the actual
These are,
treatment.
the larvicides are bacteria, they are not chemical treatments. is what I'm asking.
I have to check with my
Yeah.
vector control specialist.
What we're
to
doing, these are
confirm, but-
consistent with what the state provides, and so we are just, providing additional briquettes, larvicide.
Yeah, I can get you more information on it.
Those are considered effective and ecologically sound.
Yeah, sure, I would just.
If there's anything
I was
else.
asking in preference rather than opposed to.
Oh,
The reason I
gotcha.
would ask.
Gotcha.
The other thing I'd point out is that, if this is for Culex, it won't include the Zika trouble.
Okay.
In just the West Nile.
This is not my expertise.
Okay. So, it's fine, I just had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lee left, I'll move on. Any further questions? If not, I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. That's the last one, Jim? The next item on the agenda is public comments, and I will remind those